Welcome to Pioneers, the show where we explore the intersection between humanity and AI. I'm your host, Ankar Patel. Over the last 10 years, I've built 3 AI startups, written 2 books about the subject, and I run a weekly AI newsletter. I also regularly teach and speak about the topic at conferences. This technology has grown faster than I think any of us could have imagined, and it's making us ask really important questions, such as how ethical is AI? What will this technology look like in a few years, let alone a few months? And most importantly, does it have the power to truly change the world? And what does it mean for you? On this show, I'll be interviewing the founders, operators, and pioneers that are introducing AI into their companies and industries. We'll be asking them the really heavy-hitting questions that make them dig deep into the core of what we do. And without further ado, let's dive into today's episode. We're very excited to introduce our very first guest of the Pioneers podcast, Remington. Remington, you and I met a couple of months ago as you were looking to build out AI for your product. You picked up Multimodal to help out, and we've been working on and off since. We would love to hear a little bit more about OneView. So why don't we start with maybe a rundown of what you're up to today?
Yeah, we are currently in the business of helping decisions be easier for go-to-market teams. So a lot of generative AI today is let's make better emails and let's write content and whatever. And our vision is let's ingest data and let's write queries for you. And then let's take that data that we have and turn it into insights and action that really, like, you've got that central nervous system of understanding around your go-to-market process that's making everything easier, more scalable, process-oriented. So it's really like work meets data coming together to make you get more pipeline easier. So that's what we're doing at OneView.
That's awesome. And I've seen the product at hand, and I also know a little bit about your product vision, which we can get to in a second, but would love to run through the origin story of this idea. How did it come about to ultimately get you to the place that you're at today?
Yeah, it's kind of a fun background. We go way back, Throwback Thursday. We've got a moment in time when I got a fortune cookie that literally changed my life. I'll just tell you a little bit about it. So I was basically doing school full-time, work full-time as an SDR, and I had just been recovering from a pretty bad traumatic brain injury, and I couldn't do stuff as well as I wanted. And I needed things to be more efficient, and I kept requesting things from the operations team. Can you please help with this? Can you please help with that? And I just couldn't really get the requests done the way I wanted. So I was studying philosophy, and I was thinking about all of the different elements of change in business and whatever, my business ethics class. And we got an assignment to do basically like you go and do a volunteer service project for your employer of some sort, or find someone else you can do that for if you weren't working. Long story short, I went to my employer and I was like, hey, I could help you do all these operations things that you said that you couldn't help me get what I wanted to get out of this. So basically, I was going through this whole audit, doing this school project. I found ways that they could optimize and make my life easier as an SDR, but also other people's too. And I realized at the end of it, there was so much to change that I couldn't see it happening. If there was any possible way, it was going to be like they had to hire other people that knew other things and whatever. And I was sitting outside class and I got a fortune cookie that said, understanding the nature of change changes the nature. And I realized at that moment, the thing that needed to change was I needed to change my career and go into operations. So I went back to him and I was like, hey, I know there's a lot of things you got to figure out. There's a lot of ways that this has got to change. This is my whole business case. What if you let me do it? And if I can, then you don't have to hire somebody else. I've already done the scope. I know how this would work. Just bring me over in operations. So fast forward 2 years later, Workfront had so many other amazing people involved in the process of getting acquired. But the acquisition to Adobe was a pretty big historic moment for Adobe because they got this new way of thinking about work by bringing Workfront in. And at that time, I was still kind of doing consulting on the side. I was doing a lot of analytics and outreach projects, rolling out different things for clients. And I had another aha moment that like maybe I could combine this idea of work strategy and collaboration and operations with analytics that I'd been doing. So since that time, I've been working on building OneView. We've failed a bunch. We've had a lot of pivots. We've had a lot of different situations that have come about that have been hard and fun, and all of the above that goes with doing a job full time and a company full time on the side. But yeah, that's the origin story. I felt like I needed something. I couldn't get it. I asked a lot for help. I realized everybody needs this help. So I thought maybe I should go and make OneView so that it's easier for everybody else to have that same sort of innovation.
No, that's a great story. I haven't heard someone getting inspiration from a fortune cookie in the same way. So, I don't think people should take fortune cookies lightly based on that.
Yeah,
No,
totally.
that's amazing. So, just digging into that a little bit. I mean, it seems like you've been building for quite some time in your career. You're obviously early stage startup founder. But what's your earliest memory with technology? How did you realize you really had a knack for it?
Well, I think before that concussion, I don't feel like I had a very deep interest or a knack for technology. I was actually sitting in a sales training and a big, huge slab of steel fell off the wall and knocked me out cold, nearly broke my neck. So came to, didn't know where I was, didn't know what was going on. And my personality was a lot different. Like my wife kind of married a little bit of a different person in some ways. So I got a lot more data driven. I got a lot more focused on different things. And that's when I started to like really get deep into technology because it was something that was just like I had to understand it. I had to, or I couldn't do my job because I could only work like 3 hours a day because my brain just didn't process. So after doing all of that and then getting my brain to the point where like, okay, I'm rehabbed, I realized I learned all these things that were like disconnected to a lot of other people when you look across like sales tech stacks and how does all the data fit together and how do you like piece together and parse together these pieces of the tech stack. And that's when I realized like I wanted to go even deeper. That's one of the reasons I worked at Snowflake to get into the data side of things. That's one of the reasons why I've done consulting a lot in the tech world, just because I think as I had to do it, it gave me knowledge, and then as I wanted to do it, I was really curious about it because of that. So I'd say 2016, June of 2016 was the start of it with that great day I got hit in the head that whacked me right into my career trajectory.
Yeah, it's an awful accident, but it seems like coming out of it, it changed you to be more data driven, which got you to where you are. So maybe in some ways, like a fortunate silver lining to it all,
Oh yeah.
which makes sense. So OneView, the idea originated back 7 years ago now. You said you've gone through a couple of pivots and a couple of failures. Um, could we talk a little bit about that, sort of how that vision's changed over time?
Yeah. Yeah. The first version was called Extrovert, and I still actually have extrovert.io, the domain, which is a pretty good domain. I somehow got lucky and bought that. But the first version was like, well, I want to auto sequence a bunch of people. So how can I like create logic to auto sequence a bunch of people? And at the time, I just didn't know what I was doing. I hired a co-founder who was not the right fit, didn't know anything about sales tech, and I couldn't articulate how to do all of that. The second version was we realized like this is going to be way hard. Let's just do something simpler. So it was like, let's just make a project management tool and people can paste links in there, and that's pretty much it. And that didn't work either because go and sell like something that's worse than Asana to compete with Asana, and it's like no one
Mhm.
cares, right? It doesn't have any incremental value right now, even
Yeah.
if you think that
Yeah.
there's some cool features. So as I was doing all of that, I was trying to pay for medical bills, trying to, get a little bit of extra income doing consulting on the side. And I kept getting asked the same question over and over and over. The question was, how many people should I put into sales sequences and how should those sales sequences be structured? So I had this massive spreadsheet system that I made, this 4 template spreadsheet system that
Mhm.
I ingested lots of data, did all this consulting with the spreadsheets and made a lot of money on spreadsheets. It was great, doing all this stuff. But the iteration that really started to sink in was when I hit the apex of those two ideas coming together. There's this need for collaboration. There's knowledge workers who are burnt out. They're being asked to do way more than they can. they have no ability to deliver on some of the things that they need to because they don't have the data at their fingertips. And
Mhm.
there's also this big problem with outbound pipeline creation, sequence strategy, whatever. So how could I merge those two things together? And a natural result of that was this idea of OneView. You bring the sequence analytics and the go-to-market top-of-funnel strategy to the how do I optimize and automate my process? And all of a sudden, you have that central nervous system of things that I realized I was doing for my clients. Like I was here, you need to analyze these things, and then here's the change management plan to go and do it. And I was just project managing it. At some point, I was like, that's what the software should be. So went and did a bunch of user
Yeah.
interviews and asked them, like, do you want it to look this way? Do you want it to look that way? You know, for about a year, meeting with dozens of people across marketing operations, marketing, sales, SDRs, enablement. And that's where OneView really, I think, started to materialize. Because when I got to having the co-founder I have now, Zach, it was a lot easier because we knew exactly what people wanted. We knew the analytics, how it needed to be structured. And then working with you guys has been amazing because bringing the AI into it just makes it so we don't have to guess as much at some of the things that we know customers are searching for and what they want to try to find, because now we have that AI piece to it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I love that story because I think a lot of people hear the overnight success stories and they don't realize that the overnight success actually takes years of hard work and pivots that, when they tell the story decade later, all of that gets washed out and all you hear is like, we had instant success. But it's really through understanding the different end users, consulting like you have over the years as well, really understanding the pain points and then introducing technology in a way where you're reducing friction. So it's not that people are changing their kind of end objective. It's just that they can do their end objective, their goal, much faster because technology allows you to remove that friction. And I think
Exactly.
OneView really speaks to that quite a bit.
I agree. I think it's been
Yeah.
cool too to see with the ways in which companies are already trying to think this way. They don't want data sitting in places that are all siloed. They don't want to manage email in 4 different places and try to figure out deliverability across multiple channels. They don't want to like have 5 different project management tools and this request process and that thing over here that we have to go to the spreadsheet for. They want centralization, and the power of that desire when you match that with AI is that the centralization is actually a way to give an AI agent the ability to understand things that humans just can't. So when you couple a better way of organizing with a very powerful engine behind it to understand what's being organized, all of a
Mhm.
sudden you're interacting with the software and that's helping you to do things you could never have done or even thought to do on your own, which I think is where AI is going. And it's very cool to like just see how people are thinking about ideas and where the future could go. So definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. Just a bit of a side note. I think a lot of people listening to this podcast are likely kind of you before the accident, where they hear about AI. It feels like it's hard tech, complex. They really have no idea what everyone's talking about. It seems daunting. But I think having known you for several months now, and just hearing you even on this podcast, you explain things very simply and succinctly, which I think really helps when it comes to selling a very technical topic. So, what's your view or philosophy for selling OneView and sort of the hard tech problems you're working on to prospective buyers that may not have that background? They don't know AI, they know sales, but they have no idea how AI could really help them there.
Yeah, great question. Um, I think first and foremost, the thing that we focus on is an ethos of really helping. So when when a company comes to us, the first thing we do is a sample audit. We run everything through our AI. It's free. There's no integration required. We've set up a way to basically like grab their data and show them an outcome with like a whole summary of exactly what types of things they should be looking for and thinking about. So we educate them before they decide to even like meet with us further. And I think doing that has been really helpful. Like we went to Outreach Unleash recently, which is one of our main integrations. And where we were at there, we just did a booth with like, we called it a Genius Bar, like the Apple Genius Bar thing. And people came
Yeah.
by and gave us data and we gave them back the analysis for free, easy. Here it is. But it gave us a chance to break down for them, like, here's what you're missing when you don't have some of these analytics. So the problems you're trying to solve right now are, you want more pipeline. You want to have an easier way to get to deals with less activity. You want to make it easier to understand what's working so you can do more of it. Like, we're trying to help them understand that those outcomes that they want are achieved by having higher computation power behind the data that they have, versus a human sitting down in the data and trying to make sense of, like, is this working, or where is it working, or whatever. Because you do that and then you find something, but next day it changes. And how are you supposed to keep track of all of those changes constantly over and over and over, and then turn them into change? That's something that's the hardest part. You can't just find insights. It's got to be action based. So that's what we tell our clients. It's like, we'll help you fix the foundations so that those problems that are causing you not to have pipeline, those go away. Then we experiment and we figure out what works, and we use the background of a really powerful engine to do that. And I think that kind of, it resonates, because people are like, well, yeah, I don't want to do that myself, and yeah, I want that outcome. I think a lot of AI companies out there, they need to think more like that, because they're trying to sell the cool thing that they can do, but people don't buy what you do. Like Simon Sinek says, they buy why you do it. So you got to have a clear understanding of why. And that's why I think OneView has been so popular so far, is just that we didn't launch until we knew what people wanted and why they wanted it. So when we tell them, this is what you want, this is what we do, they're like, well, yeah, I need more pipeline, and I'd love to have you help me with that, basically. So I don't know if that answers the question you're asking, but that's a few thoughts on that.
No, absolutely answers the question. I mean, I think that is an amazing response, because I think it gets to AI being an enabler, like an invisible layer that sits on top of the data, but it's all towards accelerating the outcomes, right? Getting to the outcome, getting to the actions that the user wants to have. I think what we've seen is that with the amount of data that exists now compared to 10 years ago, it's really hard to work through that data directly, right? It's hard because there's a lot of messy data. You have to interact with it. You don't know how to interact with it. And then even if you do get insights, how do you take action on it? Whereas I think now data coupled with AI being that invisible layer, it allows you to get to action and outcome a lot faster, which is what I think you're doing with OneView. And I think a lot of people are they're identifying with it. It resonates with them, right? Which is why you've gotten the traction that you've had. And what about, a lot of times people look at technology and they think of it as just a tool, but ultimately it's people interacting with data to do their jobs better. So how do you bring a kind of a human lens to the product, to the company as a whole? Because what you will do if you're successful will change the landscape quite a lot, right? It might mean fewer jobs for certain individuals in certain roles, because now the heavy lifting is being done by AI.
Yeah, I think that's one. There's like that whole debate of, will AI end the world? Obviously, that's like the one end of that spectrum. But there's also the, like, what jobs will AI take, and that sort of thing. And I think our plan is not to try to remove jobs. Those jobs are already being removed by new processes and new ways of thinking. And the people that are being removed from those jobs are often more so, especially in the SaaS space, they're adapting. They're realizing, like, I can't just do what I've always done. I need to do something different. So we're trying to arm those people that are forward thinking, that realize that maybe there is an Iron Man suit that I can strap to myself that will help me to make those decisions and see the things I can't see. And I think it's those types of people who are the ones that are early adopters for us. Those are the types of people we're working with. And they're not thinking like, oh, now I can go and fire everyone. That's not the goal. The plan is like, how can I use the headcount that I have to get more revenue by making sure those people are working efficiently? And that's, I think, where if people are trying to, certainly you could find the ways that you could cut your overall bottom line by getting rid of humans that are unnecessary. But that is probably more of a product of you hiring people to do the wrong things in the first place, and then realizing you didn't need them once you found things that were easier to do otherwise. So we're trying to sit at the center of strategy, not replace the ways that people do things, so that when you have that headcount, you can go and use them in the direction that actually makes sense. And it won't be something that like makes no sense from a business perspective. In fact, like we're scenario planning that. We have a scenario planner that allows you to see if I have X amount of team members versus if I have less team members, with all the factors that are involved in that entire process. How would that work if I cut down team members, if I change my conversion rates, or if I adjusted something here? So we've thought about that from the very beginning, because with AI and with the whole push, if you can't really guess at what you should be doing with the headcount, you might think I should just fire everybody. And that would be a really dangerous mistake, because the attrition that you get from that, and then the resulting need for an investment to find new people, that's a huge, huge cost to a business. So, advice to anybody who's thinking, oh, I could use AI to replace roles. I don't know if we're quite there yet. And even when we do, that's a big decision that could have really bad consequences if you do it the wrong way.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that's a scary thing that a lot of people think about. It's like, oh my God, AI is going to replace jobs. And I think the better frame is it's going to replace a part of what someone does, right? It's going to at least change that scope of their role. But as long as they adapt, they could actually become more productive. They can create more value individually, and the organizations that adopt it with the same people, they're just able to be more productive, right? And so all of a sudden, you're creating more value for the business, for the people that you sell to. And I think that's absolutely the right frame. I don't think we're in a Terminator type scenario, fortunately, right?
But
So I
it's
think
like
that all makes
it's like the
sense.
difference
Now,
between
I
that
think
abundance. Oh, sorry, I think there's a little delay. One thing on that I
no, go
think
ahead,
is,
Remington. Go ahead.
it's a good
Yeah.
way to like formulate the mindset. There's like this abundance mindset, and there's the scarcity mindset. And if you use AI in a scarcity mindset, the goal is, can I cut? Can I get rid of? Can I eliminate? Whatever. But if we're talking about an abundance mindset, what we're saying is, can I use the teammates that I have to do 3 jobs? What if I could hire more headcount with somebody that I already know and trust, and they don't have to be hired because they're doing 4 things that one person could never before until today do? Well, now your company is the same size, but you've actually hired more workers because some of those are AI. So I think that that's like, it's 2 different veins of thought, similar result in the way that you use AI, but I don't know. One of them is more productive than the other, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. Want to dig a little bit more into something that we've done together, which I know it seems daunting for a lot of people to do, but um, obviously users asking questions and then having to wait for a data analyst to go and query a database to find the right answer. That's been a
Mm-hmm.
huge struggle for many organizations. Because they do the hard work of getting the data in order, but then it becomes inaccessible because it's hard to interact with code with the underlying data stream. And I think the parts that we've worked on together allow a user to, in plain text, ask a question and then query that data automatically using AI and retrieve the right answer. As you think about this technology and applications like that, um, what are your thoughts about where it can be used in at least the sales function, where potentially things were impossible to do without a data analyst that now all of a sudden a non-technical salesperson can do to make their job easier and just be more productive?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. The thing with like sales data is, it's not that complicated to know what questions you should be asking, because we know the foundations of sales revolve a lot around the inputs. So are you using the right accounts? Do you have the right contact data? Is it good data? Are the sequences good? How's my messaging performing? Are the activity levels high enough? Those different questions, they're all things that, like, you could talk with an operations person even at a company that might feel like they're 10 years behind, and they're still thinking about the same things. The hard part is that data, getting to it, is sometimes the tricky thing, like you're saying. So giving a lot of people who know the questions that they want to ask the ability to ask those the way that they want to ask them, I think it also raises the effectiveness of sales as a whole. So we're stopping the whole like mass volume outbound pandemic of like, we're going to send as many emails as we can to everybody and hope for the best. It's like, no, stop doing that, please, because you're literally ruining it for the rest of us. Go and do a more targeted approach to the specific people you need to go to. Let AI show you who those are, because you're getting results in some areas,
Mm-hmm.
not others. AI can show you those things. You just have to be able to ask the right questions and have to providers like OneView that know what questions to ask. I think that's going to change a lot of like you've got the earlier entry level sales ops person that could potentially make huge impacts for a company. Like me at Workfront, going back, if I had had something like that, I wasn't a data analyst, I was an SDR, but I knew there were
Yeah.
certain things we needed to do more of, and I had to go and pull out spreadsheets basically from all the tools and learn to cobble together things with VLOOKUP, and then take it to my boss and be like, am I close here, and what am I supposed to, all that. Take that away, all of a sudden everybody's thinking about the right questions, not trying to panic and just like push volume, because that's what we see in sales. That being said, though, I don't
Mhm.
think sales is the coolest use case for this. Like, I see a much bigger picture where there's data tools like Snowflake, for example, that pull a lot of data in from all these different places. And they just had a recent acquisition too, where they're pulling in the data and then they're giving you the ability to write queries in a much cooler way than I think even OneView can right now. But at some point, if we can get to the place where AI is looking at all of that data together, and we're seeing the ability for people in other industries, especially industries where it's like, let's make the world a better place, the medical system, the nonprofits that are trying to work together around a specific topic, or researchers who can share the data that they've had in a clean room environment, all of a sudden we're not just talking about collaboration around how do we like increase go to market something. That's a great starting place and it's got a lot of clear need, but like I think that's where the
Yeah.
coolest use cases sit, because that's when the data becomes something that like millions of people want to use, not just like the companies who understand pipeline enough to realize they need to ask questions with AI.
Yeah. No, I love that, Remington. I think speaking to you, I mean, I've seen this. You have a much grander vision for what you're building, right? And it might be in sales tech right now, but I think you have many other areas that you think you could have a lot more impact. So with OneView, where is that vision? Do you try to do a lot of that within the same company, or do you just build this out, and then maybe later on in your career you go and tackle some of the harder, maybe bigger impact problems? Just trying to think through, basically what that journey could look like for you.
Yeah, I don't know. We're still early. So I only recently left Snowflake full time, and have been doing all of this with our clients for, like last 2 years is when I've been doing all of what we've been doing. But I think where it'll probably end up is we will expand within the private sector to the different areas of companies that they really have so much data and don't know what to do with. Like a new one that we're going to add soon is lead routing and marketing campaigns. So instead of just doing sequences and understanding how those are performing, like what if you could see the overlap in every single campaign and all the different areas of those campaigns and how they work together and what is the lists that need to be adjusted. That's a use case that a lot of companies could use, because there's a lot of different nonprofits that are trying to do marketing campaigns that are kind of messing up some of those data points and not knowing how to make the lists work. There's a lot of, I think, humanitarian efforts where mass email is part of that. So the emailing side of it, I think, is a big focus that we're going to try to lean into coming into 2024. But I also think long term, and it's going to be at OneView, hopefully, we're going to try to bring a lot of other data sets in. Like anything that you could imagine you want to have, you could bring it into OneView and make it something that the AI can work with so that anybody can do whatever use cases they want. I don't know where that will go. It's kind of interesting to think about all the different ways that could be used.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the number of applications that AI can have is so numerous, and I think there are many that we haven't even thought about. Right? Same thing with like the internet and mobile technology, mobile apps, for example, that came about. It took several years for the full picture to come about. In fact, one of the things that we're trying to do at Multimodal is come up with a thought leadership report about how basically leaders like yourself can use AI across the workplace, across the different departments. We're actually launching that in November, which I think is going to be a huge benefit for people that are in leadership roles, are thinking about applications of AI, but haven't quite figured out which 1 to 3 use cases they should tackle first, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's going to be really, really, really helpful to many more companies. But switching gears here just for a quick second. As you left Snowflake, obviously big established company. Now you're doing OneView. How do you think about building company culture? And it comes up so much because I'm based in here in New York. Some startups have offices now, and they're doing the in-office bit entirely. Some have hybrid. some like multimodal are still like remote, still largely decentralized. And curious what your thoughts are about, how do you build really strong company culture while still having access to talent, perhaps in places where there may not be huge clusters already.
Yeah, we're definitely digital first as one of our company values, and we plan to remain that way. We'll always have an office for those that want to be in an office, because in some cases it is better for them as a individual and in their personal situation to have like a place to be that they want to work in. You probably one of those like more remote workspace type situations. But I think the digital nomad is the type of company we're planning to grow, because the culture of a company and the diversity of that company can be, I think, vastly expanded if we don't have to look in just a few areas, and that's, or make them move to a certain area. So our plan is definitely to stay remote. um, as doing so, though, I think in running a consultancy this last 4 years, we've got a team in Poland. We've got consultants we've worked with from London. We've done clients in Germany. We've done a lot of stuff with South America. Um, the problem with doing that is that the culture quickly becomes an always on, working all hours of the day, because the time zones that you have, they cross so much that I think it creates some of the burnout and the problems that we're trying to even help solve with OneView. So something I'm still grappling with, I think, is in that remote work environment, digital nomads, digital first, all that. How do we create the types of processes and procedures that allow for work-life balance, and thinking about that before we get too far into startup mode and everybody feels like they always have to be on because their coworker on their team is from a different country and that sort of thing. And we found that balance pretty well at Snowflake. Travis Henry, who I reported to, hired people in APJ as well as in Amsterdam, and then across different time zones in the US for our SDR operations team. They're all in an office. But man, like, he managed the team so well. He showed how to do that. I think we had this regular recurring stand up at a certain time, and then we flip flopped that time when it was a different time zone. And then we had a very clear problem solution discussion in all of our stand ups, where we knew we were coming with what we worked on and what we were going to be working on, and any blockers. So it was like the pattern was there enough, and we knew there was going to be a space for when we would collaborate on problems. So it wasn't an always on fire drill, oh my gosh, I have to solve this now type of culture. So that's what I'm trying to get towards, so that we can avoid some of those problems I've seen happen in other companies that have gone digital first.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's amazing to hear because it's I think a lot of people, especially when it comes to startups, startup founders, startup operators, engineers, some of the early hires. The consensus that I'm seeing is that a lot of them do want that flexibility to work from wherever. But you do still need a strong culture where people feel like they're still part of a team, right? They're not just
Yeah.
individuals, they're not mercenaries, they're part of a team. Um, and I think you have gone a step above and beyond. So you've told me this story, but would love for our listeners to hear it. So you have a very nice setup with a camper van. You're on the road, you're working. Could you tell us a
Yeah.
little bit more about that? Because I think it's one of the most unique ways to live and then still run a startup on the road.
Yeah, it's unique until I'm literally like in a kayak on a phone call with you, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, you're like actually in a kayak," you know? But yeah, so my wife was really excited to do a van for like the last 3 or 4 years, and it just never worked. Never was going to work, probably because of some of the things that we're trying to figure out with health stuff, and just working and trying to figure out Snowflake, was you have to be in an office, all that. So when I raised an investment, it was just like a small investment to be able to cover the costs of the infrastructure that we're running in order to do all the AI stuff. I told the investor that, like, hey, I could go and live with my in-laws, which is great. Love them. I've lived there before during the pandemic. Or I could build out a camper van and live in the camper van, but I just need a little more investment. And she was like, hey, do the camper van. That's awesome. So I went and told my wife, and she was like, what? Are you serious? She said yes. So we got that worked out, and that's been super fun. It's like got better Wi-Fi than you can even have in a house, because it bonds the signals of cell coverage towers that you can't get unless you have like an industrial antenna like we have. It bonds those signals together into a single Wi-Fi coverage, which is cool. But it also is like self-charging and all that stuff. So we're out there doing cool outdoorsy stuff, and then I come back to the van and do different calls and whatnot, which is great. We do, I think, spend time in family enough to that, like when it's really buckle down time, like right now after our big Unleash conference, I've been spending a lot more time just doing client calls and not being as much on the road. But yeah, it's been really good. And I definitely think anybody who's trying to think about that, happy to give you van life suggestions. We've studied over 100 companies. We know exactly which ones you should probably look at if you're thinking Mercedes versus Dodge. Reach out. Happy to give you advice on that.
Awesome, Remington. Well, we'll keep that. We'll keep your contact information on the podcast details so others can reach out. So I think you have a really great story. It's not just a digital nomad. You're a roaming digital nomad, and you're doing very active, like risk sports along the way. So it's, when you talk about work-life balance, you're definitely doing. You're living both sides really, really well, which I think a lot of our listeners will want to see how to arrange their lives like that. All right, so final question, and then we have to get off the line. What are 3 books that you recommend people read? It could be business or fiction, but 3 books that you really found to be very valuable this year.
First one is The Alchemist. That one is amazing. If you're looking for a fiction book, it's an easy read, but it's got a message in it that everyone needs to hear. The second one is The Anatomy of Peace, especially right now with a lot of the conflict that we're seeing around the world. That book, of any book I've read, has the ability to transform your mindset about humans and how to make better decisions around just how you treat humans. And then the other one, I'd say it's a toss-up between a couple, but I've really loved the one that I've read. I actually don't remember the name of it right now. It's one about identity. It's a philosophy book. So if you're a nerd about philosophy, it's called Identity, Understanding, or Talking to Ourselves and Understanding Identity or something. It goes into like the different layers of who we are and how our brains work in what we think about ourselves and stuff. And that book has been really, really helpful. So yeah, that's the 3 I'd recommend.
Amazing. Look forward to picking up those books, but I haven't read those. I'm sure our listeners will really want to kind of dig in there too. All right, so final question: what would you have as advice for a younger Remington at the start of his career, knowing what you know now, having gone through those experiences? Because I think a lot of our listeners are also early on in their careers, and they would benefit from that experience that you would have given yourself years ago when you started out.
Yeah. I think, first of all, be patient with yourself. And second of all, find the people in your life, as well as those that you don't know, that know stuff, that can wrap your problems you're trying to solve with context and advice that you could never have come up with. Like, find those who've walked that road. That was the best decision that I made like 2 years ago. I surrounded myself with people that they've been there, done that. Like the CEOs of huge companies, I prospected into them and said, can you mentor me, please? I just want 30 minutes with you. Can you please talk with me? Or taking the VP of marketing to lunch to just learn about the problems they face and how to navigate the political arenas of their job and stuff like that. And I wish that I had done that from the time I first got into my career, because the last 2 years of doing that have been like a slingshot, not in just understanding, but in relationships. Now I'm doing OneView. I go back to all those people who I've helped them. They've helped me. Now that's like, okay, well, let's do this together. How can we help OneView go different places? And it's just made partnerships so much easier. It's made the things that I'm focused on learning so much easier because I've got a base of people to help me. So yeah, be patient with yourself and find those who can help you grow and stick by them. I think that's the thing that I would say.
Amazing. I think that's super valuable advice. I can't kind of echo my sentiment in those areas in the same way, because it's absolutely something that I wish I knew when I was younger too, and I think many people should be aware of it. And I think going forward, same thing. I think the advice still holds: be patient. Build a network of people that can surround you. Awesome, man. Well, really appreciate you joining the podcast. How can people get in touch with you or with OneView if they're interested? If you have any final call to action for our listeners as well, would love to hear that.
Yeah. Hey, free sample audit. Like I said, anybody who wants to see how your sequences are going to perform, give me the sequence and we'll give you a free audit back. And then you can decide if you think it's worth pursuing. So come into the LinkedIn page of OneView or just go and add me on LinkedIn and share a message. Hey, I'd like to learn more about the free audit and we'll get you set up.
Okay, perfect. We'll leave that information in the show notes as well. Remington, thank you so much for joining the podcast. You're our very first guest. And when we do our 100th anniversary episode, we hope to have you on and hear about OneView then. So thanks again. Thanks
Yeah,
for everything.
absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.